this Gothic, incredible monument of a cathedral, considered one of the finest examples of Brabantine Gothic architecture in the world. The nave, like the central hall, has all the characteristics of Brabantine Gothic, which we'll get to. It has a Baroque pulpit of Adam and Eve carved out of wood, intricate designs, haunting the expressions on their faces, being cast out of the Garden of Eden. And they introduce this building with a piece of paper written in Comic Sans. Aloha and welcome back to Wanderous. I am your host, Andrew Crusoe, and this is the show. This is the show designed to encourage you to go outside your comfort zone, to explore the planet, or you can just live vicariously through me. I have quite an exciting and entertaining episode for you today. Today we're going to go to Brussels, which doesn't sound mind-blowing, but we're going to see some stuff that looks like it's right out of the movie Dune. And we're going to see a urinating statue and a bunch of other entertaining things. Come along with me. Let's dive into the special extravaganza Brussels, Belgium. This is the only episode about Belgium I'm going to do, so I hope you enjoy it. Now, I've just gone through many dozens of photos to refresh my memory of this beautiful time that I had in Brussels, Belgium. I'm really excited to share this story with you today. It's full of surprises, and I was really lucky, okay? So I've talked about on the show, how I use couchsurfing.com, which is a hospitality exchange site where you basically, it's all based on references. And you read each other's references, you look at your reputation, and you send a request. And I got to stay with a really cool stained glass artist, actually. It was one of his like huge hobbies. I think he also taught stained glass. It wasn't his main thing, but he was very talented. So when we last left off, I should back up a little bit. When we last left off, I had just taken a blah car ride from Paris. I'd been in Paris for about a week. I had a wonderful time. You can listen to previous episodes of this show if you want to hear about that adventure. And I got dropped off kind of in the middle of Brussels. And I believe I think I took, it was like one bus ride. It wasn't too difficult to get to where I'd be staying, which was, as I said, this stained glass artist who lived in a little flat that was, I think it was 3 floors, actually. It was really funky. It was a cool apartment, actually. So his kitchen and his dining room were on the first level. And then there was a staircase that I suppose is more common in Belgium. A staircase that went up to the second level. It had a sort of a living room and an air mattress, and that's where I stayed. And then the next floor up was my host's room and the bathroom. And there was this large, I'll never forget, this large bathtub, this big tub, and sort of a handheld, like little spray thing. And it was cool. It was actually very homey and comfortable. And in exchange, like I cooked for him and I cleaned and, just try to do nice little things around. I stayed there for, I think my first was 3 nights. And the first 2 days, though, I must have been out of it because I have no photos of the first 2 days I was in Belgium. I think I was just so tired from the very eventful week I had in Paris. I didn't do anything, and sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes it's the best thing for you. You have to take care of your health. If you don't have your health, how are you going to walk around and explore a city? How are you going to enjoy your time? But I got to admire his stained glass, and he was a big nerd. This guy was such a nerd. He had Lord of the Rings books in English and in, I think it was, in French as well. He had The Hobbit. I wish I'd had more energy to just kind of like borrow a book and enjoy that, but I don't. I'm a little fuzzy on exactly what I was doing. I think I was catching up on podcasts, to be honest. But I was really blessed, really lucky. It was like the second or third morning because I also went out. I had to like figure, okay, where do I get food? You know, there's that sort of adjustment phase where you look around and you find, okay, where's a good market and where's a good deal and what does he have? Is there a nice pot? Is there a skillet? So I went and I got like oatmeal, which is, you know, one of my things that I make every day. Anyway, I was very lucky that it was the second or third morning he offered to give me a walking tour of Brussels itself. I learned that my host was basically a historian, he was an amateur historian. He had a great passion for the history of his country, which was good because I didn't know very much about Belgium, to be honest. And I still don't know that much about Belgium, but I was given a bit of a crash course. And one of the first places we walked to was this amazing cathedral that could have been out of and please, I mean, no disrespect, could have been out of a science fiction book or a science fiction movie. We walked to the Cathedral of St. Michael and St. Gudula. A lot of people just call it the Cathedral of St. Gudula or just St. Gudula. It's this medieval Catholic cathedral right in the middle of Brussels in Belgium. And it's dedicated to Michael and Gudula because they're the patron saints of the city, apparently. I found out later. Very important. You know, a lot of Catholics there. And it is a wild building. You know, they started building it in like 1100. Almost 1,000 years ago, they started building this thing. And they finished it. It took them like 300 years to finish building this. So there's a funny juxtaposition, though. There's a funny, I don't know, as a designer, with a design background, it was very funny because you're standing in front of this towering, incredible structure. And what's inside was way more interesting than the outside. And then there was a sign explaining in English, which was nice, explaining the history and how it was a chapel. And I will include this photo for the supporters. We'll talk about the photos in a minute. But the whole thing was set in Comic Sans, which from one level is funny, but another level I think is very disrespectful. Comic Sans is intended for comic strips. It's supposed to look like handwriting. It was Comic Sans. If you're not familiar with Comic Sans, is the one typeface, what you might call font, the one typeface that you cannot take seriously. You've seen if you don't know what Comic Sans is, you've certainly seen Comic Sans. It basically looks like a child writing stuff with a crayon. If you look at it, like even the capital D, I won't belabor this point, but I thought it was pretty funny and sad that they're talking about the history of this Gothic, incredible monument of a cathedral, considered one of the finest examples of Brabantine Gothic architecture in the world. The nave, like the central hall, has all the characteristics of Brabantine Gothic, which we'll get to. It has a Baroque pulpit of Adam and Eve being cast out. You know, it's basically this elevated lookout tower, this pulpit in the middle of the nave, looking out on the congregation of Adam and Eve carved out of wood, intricate designs, haunting the expressions on their faces, being cast out of the Garden of Eden. And they introduce this building with a piece of paper written in Comic Sans. And I thought I had mixed feelings about that. But let's get inside. So I walk inside and it's just incredible. It's massive. The nave, the arches, it's all, you know, vaulted ceilings with these gorgeous curves. And people who do support the show will get to see some of this. It is striking what they've done here. Like I said, they've got Adam and Eve sort of like below, and you've got the angels sort of below the pulpit, and there's steps. Of course, there's little signs that say, "Don't you dare step on these steps." It's very dark wood, and I don't know. It's hard to describe something. It feels like it's out of a very intense dream, and it's so large, you know, they have all these columns. There are 12 main columns for each of the 12 apostles, of course, in the Gospels, in the New Testament. And obviously just the stained glass is incredibly lifelike. I had a note on one of the photos that I'm like, this is from 1534 kind of thing. So the people who support the show will get these photos. I actually have something like over 50 photos, definitely over 50, maybe even 60, which is honestly a kind of a pain in the neck because Patreon doesn't always upload things correctly. So sometimes I have to upload them 2 at a time. So it takes a while, but I really give the people who support this show at just $10 a month is the entry for these bonuses. There's also a $5 you can look at where you get a bunch of audiobook content. But if you want to get the behind the scenes of Wanderous, including access to a bunch of other stuff, you get dozens of photos every Wednesday. And these bonuses for this episode are especially eye-popping partly because of Gudula and partly because of the mannequin and the incredible other places I'm going to talk about later in this episode. My favorite thing in this cathedral, easily though, the thing that made it seem like it was out of the movie Dune, is what I've learned is called a swallow's nest organ. When I walked in, it's hard not to see. It's hard to miss this. It's an organ. Now, normal organs are they're on the floor. Or maybe they're attached kind of like to the wall and they go up the wall. This one didn't touch the floor at all. This was attached, vaulted up, attached to the ceiling, way above our heads. It's like, I don't know, 20 meters tall. It's absurd. Like 12, at least 12. And it's just sort of tapers. Like it does seem like a nest, but the angles are all just like so ornate. And there are these trapezoids and triangles, and it looks like it's out of a science fiction film. It was one of the most beautiful, bizarre things I saw in the entire continent of Europe when I was there. It is gorgeous and amazing, and it was a shame we were not there to hear it played on that day. Maybe someday I'll go back and I'll get to hear it played, but even just being able to observe, it's hard to describe this. It's so tall and so narrow, and there's a little stairwell that comes off of the main area that the organist has to go around, and then they go inside of it. It's like a spaceship. It's basically like a spaceship docked to the side of the wall. And it's wooden. I don't know how they made this, okay? Swallow's nest organ. Look them up. They apparently were pretty common in the Renaissance because they symbolize, like, if the music was coming from an object that was floating over the congregation, they considered it to be divine music. But this particular example is just incredibly well done. And I learned that this is not original to the building. This was put in the year 2000, apparently. So it's a modern renovation to a building that's almost 1,000 years old, or at least began construction in the 11th century. So you've got like the Baroque pulpit, which, you've got the, Adam and Eve. You've got a confessional that's also just like carved. It's so ornate. It's so wild. It is such a striking thing. And they've got 12 columns, and each of them have a life-sized carved statue of each of the 12 apostles right there. There is also, if I'm recalling correctly, I believe I am, there is a video that I posted to TikTok and Shorts and Instagram, if I can even find it. And it's easier to find stuff on YouTube and TikTok, where we actually were there right toward the end of a little musical performance on the other side of the nave. So you get to hear, that's a very special video to me because you get to hear the acoustic space. You get to hear like how big this space was. It was great. It was just fantastic. And I'll put that in the show notes. The show notes for this episode are always found wherever you got this show. So it's either, if you're hearing this on Spotify, it'll be in your Spotify app under the description. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it'll be there in the feed. If you're on YouTube, it'll be in the YouTube description. This podcast lives in as many places as possible because I want it to be easy for you to find it. There's also a very strange photo I have of just feet on the ground. I don't know why. Sometimes I don't take a note, and then I just end up with a very odd remnant of a sculpture. But our next real stop was to a famous chocolatier, chocolatier, Laurent Gerbeau, which is a famous chocolatier. I'll just say it in a very American way. In Brussels. Unfortunately, you guessed it, if you've been listening to the show for a while, it's hard to find something that didn't have milk powder in it. They're very into au lait with milk, but it was apparently this is an institution. It had been there for, 3,000 years or something like that. We ended up kind of circling back around, and we reached the Garden of Mont des Arts, also known as the Garden of Kunstberg, which was, unfortunately, the buildings behind it were undergoing some renovation, some restoration at the time. The print that they were wrapped in, buildings were sort of wrapped in this paper. It tried to blend in, although there was an advertisement in front of it too. Don't ever miss out the opportunity to advertise a very large watch. But the Garden of Kunstberg, which is our next stop, was lovely. It was a lovely public space, very well manicured. I got a photo. My host took a photo of that. But it was more interesting than the garden, though, was the public art on the walls of the buildings. Very bizarre. Like, if you know who Hieronymus Bosch is, very bizarre, very trippy stuff. That's just public art. It's all over the place. We're going to come back to that later. But one thing you have to experience is the waffles, right? Belgium is famous for their waffles. They have a long history of the gastronomy, the cuisine of waffles. However, I'm lactose intolerant, and I'm also kind of sensitive to egg, so I needed to find a vegan waffle. And I found one place which still exists, which is called Vegan Waf, VEGANWAF, which is a little stall in this sort of market area in Brussels. And my host was very copacetic, and we walked over. Now, downtown Brussels, one of the great things about Brussels is it's pretty walkable. It's a very developed, pretty clean city, at least when I was there in August of 2022, not to date this too much. But we stopped by Vegan Waf. They charged me a little expensive I think it was €5 for one waffle with custard on it, and there was no seating. We had to go out and sit somewhere else. But it was pretty fluffy, and I let my host, who was not vegan, was like, that seems strange. And I was like, well, do you want to try some? And he tried it, and he's like, yes, it's strange, but it's pretty good. He was very polite. I think he probably didn't like it. But it was, I thought, very delicious. We also walked through, of course, there's going to be like, you still have what's the word I'm looking for? The white cream. There's a vegan version of that, which is very, very good. So you can find, if you are vegetarian or vegan, you can find options in Brussels. There are many plant-based people in Brussels. I'll put that in the show notes. I can link to Vegan Waf. I believe they have an Instagram as well. We also walked by where they were making the more traditional waffles. Of course, they have Liège waffles and other waffles. There's a video I have as well I can link to from my YouTube shorts and TikTok of my host really graciously sort of explaining a little bit about these waffles and how these really are a big tradition. And you can look through the windows. You can watch them making them. It's really a really cool experience. But the funny thing about Brussels is the piece of art that it's most famous for, correct me if I'm wrong, is a baby urinating. It's called mannequin piss. This is true. Look it up. MANNEKENPIS. This is a Dutch term. Of course, there's a lot of Dutch, there's a lot of French, there's a lot of Flemish. It's a mix of all these. I mean, the Dutch controlled that area. It was a whole situation. But mannequin piss is Dutch for the little pissing man. It's supposed to be a little pissing man. It looks like a baby. It is a bronze fountain sculpture that was put in place in 1619. Now, that's interesting. And it's just famous. People love taking pictures of this, and they dress this baby too. There's a whole calendar. They call them skins. This calendar I took a picture of will be in the bonus for people who support the show. You'll see they dress the baby up as Dracula. They dress the baby up as different friars, Red Knights of Belgium, a Catalanese herder and a shepherd. It is all in observance of the local holidays. It is quite entertaining. I was not there when it was dressed up, which was, I think, preferable because you want to see the base level mannequin piss, if you can, peeing into a into a basin. Unfortunately, this is not the original. Just to be totally transparent, not the original mannequin piss. This was replaced in 1965. They put a replica and preserved the original, but it's still worth seeing. It's not that big. And if you go toward the end of the day, especially if you go in August, it's not that crowded because, as I've spoken about before, August is kind of the best time to be, in my opinion, especially late August when it's cooled down a little bit. Probably the best time to be in Paris and in Belgium because a lot of the locals are out. They're gone. They're out for vacation. So things tend to be a little less crowded. At least they were in my experience. Now I'm going to tell a little story that I don't have enough photos of. I've got some, but this walking tour he took me on was quite an adventure. I was so disoriented. We ended up going down this alley. Brussels is quite a dynamic city. I mean, they have like a massive sculpture of an atom that one of the few things I didn't go to. That's like 20, 30 meters tall, but we could see it in the distance. Once we took this elevator up this strange building and found ourselves on the roof of another building. And then we got up and then, no, it wasn't the roof of a building. It was actually another street. So Brussels can be really confusing and kind of psychedelic in the way it's laid out. It's not predictable. And we reached The View. It's a giant Ferris wheel called The View. And it was quite a view. It was a view. In the distance, I could actually see the atom that I described earlier. I did kind of skip over something, though, and this will be in the bonus, too. If you can find the Fresque Dinosaur, Fresque Dinosaur, go there. It is a amazing piece of public art that is basically like a big pterodactyl drawn on the side of two buildings. Really, really delightful. It was quite a walking experience. But we got to The View. We got to see the sunset coming down from The View and the rather disorienting layout of the city. We also went through a place that seems to have more than one name, but we got to the square of the Petit Sablon, where they have these statues of these counts of Egmont and Horn who were executed in 1568 during a rebellion. This town has really changed hands quite a few times. But when they commemorate something in Belgium, they really do a beautiful job. The landscaping and the horticulture is just so beautiful. As the sun set, the whole city just kind of lit up with these orange lights, and the cobblestone streets was quite pretty. I really recommend, especially at dusk, sort of walking around Belgium can be kind of it does have a reminiscence of Paris in some ways. And the last place I saw in this wonderful walking tour were the Saint Hubert galleries, the Royal Saint Hubert galleries, where they have a gallery for the king and a gallery for the queen. We entered in from the street to the Galerie de la Reine, it means queen, and it's this old market that has been refurbished. It's just a single long hall with a glass dome, like a glass curved ceiling, and there's all of these cute little shops, chocolate shops and beautiful little shops, and it just goes. You can just go and go and go. It felt like such a full day. I felt like I traveled to many different time periods. And I was very thankful for my host for just giving me a walk around. You know, one of the things that is worth keeping in mind is that the host often enjoys doing stuff like that because they get to experience their city through new eyes. Not everybody, of course, but it's worth keeping in mind. It's good to accept an offer like that because not only do you both get some exercise, which we could all use a bit of, but you're going to probably ask questions that maybe no one's asked before. And that was a beautiful opportunity. So the next day I switched hosts though. My host was hosting somebody else, and I stayed, and this was a good thing. I took the bus across town. Well, maybe I even walked, actually. I think I took the bus. Yeah, I took the bus across town, and I got to stay right across the street, basically right across the street from the National Basilica of the Sacred Heart in Kokelberg. Kokelberg is sort of like I don't know. It's just a different part of Brussels. It's still in Brussels. And I stayed with a very kind older guy who was hosting somebody else as well. He had the cutest apartment in the world. And there's a picture of this like wonderful, we just had like a banquet. It felt like a banquet. I made rice with vegan pesto and broccoli, because that's the funny combination of things that I put together. I think I was even traveling with some extra rice at the time that I'd been making at the first place. And all three of us, his other guest and me, we had this wonderful talk about travel, and this was this guy's first time in Belgium as well. I think it was his first time even using couchsurfing, and he had a lot of stuff though. You can tell when somebody's no offense, you can tell when somebody's just started, when they're bringing like 30 kilograms of stuff, because that's gonna be tough to haul around. And the more you travel though, the more you figure out what you can leave behind and how much freer you feel. But let's wrap up this episode. I want to wrap up this episode by talking about the National Basilica of the Sacred Heart, which is, when it was built, it was the 5th largest cathedral in the world. It is still one of the largest basilicas in the world. 3,500 people can be in here. It's just crazy. It's the 14th largest church in the world by area. Definitely the largest church in Belgium. It was an incredible example of stained glass. You go in and it just keeps going and going and going and going and going. They did not have a swallow's nest organ, unfortunately, but some very striking art that the supporters will get to check out. I won't go on and on about this one. I do recommend you check it out. It is free. It is massive. It is, my only small critique of it would be that while it is huge, I found the other cathedral, the Cathedral of St. Gudula, I found it more attractive overall because of the building material. You know, when you're building something so large, I actually think my host was telling me about this as well. They were working on it partly during the World Wars. It was just a different time. And they built this cathedral primarily out of brick, which is fine, but not necessarily the most photogenic exterior. Not bad, but compared to the other cathedrals, which were just blew me away with their gravitas on the exterior, the limestones and granite that were used. You compare it to brick, and brick seems sort of not as exciting, I guess. That's my only, small criticism of the National Basilica of Kokelberg. Still an incredible building, still a wonderful place, totally free. And yeah, you can go and you can check it out. And there was one thing I forgot to mention that I learned today that I thought was quite wild, is that there are 8 bells in the other cathedral, in the Cathedral of St. Michael and St. Gudula. One of them is like 10,000 pounds, like over 6,000 kilograms. Reading about the Cathedral of St. Gudula is quite a history lesson. I mean, each of the bells have a name. They're named after different people. They're all huge. There's all of this special terminology for tower bells. And they all, obviously each bell has a specific note, and I don't know. The lowest one is this very, very low G, and there's only one in the North Tower. And I don't know. If you're interested in the Cathedral of St. Gudula, I recommend look it up, because it is both cathedrals are quite amazing to read about, actually. If you're interested in old architecture and you don't have to be very religious. It's not a secret that I don't consider myself a religious person, but I consider myself a very spiritual person. that I find wisdom in many different teachings. And these places have such an energy to them. They really are containers for this charged energy. And I think that's why they wanted to build these structures so huge. Is not only can you hold more people, but there is sort of something that happens in these very large spaces where you feel an impact even stronger. But I digress. At this point, I was getting very excited to finally make my way to Germany, where I was going to visit 2 friends and end up seeing a special castle and all things. We're going to get to that. But the last thing was I actually switched back. I was very happy that my first host let me stay. I think it was one more night back at the place, which ended up being good. I think I fixed one of his like cabinet handles. He had like a little kitchen issue. And I was able to, I think that might have been the night we watched the comedy film too. We watched a very funny film. We were laughing our butts off. And the next day I made my way to the Flixbus, which I recommend. Flixbus, Flix. I could put that as a travel tip. One of the best ways to get around many parts of Europe is Flixbus and Megabus, depending on what country you're in. They're not a sponsor. They could be. They should be. And I made my way over and actually crossed through. I was in Netherlands for about 10 minutes, because Netherlands has this very funny border that kind of like ekes in. So the shortest distance between 2 points is a curved line on a sphere, but it's basically a straight line when you're not going that far. And we drove through Netherlands on the way to Essen, which was where my German adventure would begin. Why Essen? Well, you have to tune in next time to find out. But the bus journey over, I'm including a couple of photos of the bus journey as well, was very pretty. Germany, it kind of instantly got a bit more green when I made it over. There really are good reasons why borders are where they are. A lot of them follow the edge of rivers. And I made it to Germany just in time to get in a little fight with a ticket kiosk computer. And would I be able to use it? Would I need to ask for help? One way or another, I was going to figure this out. I'll tell that story next time. I'm very excited to talk about Germany. Also an amazing country. Amazing, despite what the locals say, actually quite good trains. I would learn that Germans are quite self-critical in my experience. Pretty critical, and that's doesn't have to be. Don't be critical about the trains, at least. That's my opinion. Thank you so much for listening to Wanderous. I hope you enjoyed this whirlwind, strange episode about Belgium. Would I recommend Brussels? Yes. Should you go out of your way to go to Brussels? I don't know. Check in with yourself. It's not Paris, but there are so many places to explore in Brussels. There's a lot of food. There's a lot of art. It's a very special historical place. It's worth it. And it certainly worked out for me, and I made sure to write my hosts. Like, I think actually the second host, I actually wrote a little poem. I don't know if I'll read it. It's very corny. But I used the acronym of his name, and it's a nice thing. It's a nice thing to leave, because I felt like there really wasn't much I can do. Sometimes there's a host that just has their stuff, they have got some money and their place is clean, and they don't really need anything from you besides they want to talk and hear about your travels. But my second host, was actually gone for a lot of it, so I had the whole place to myself the full day when I was kind of in between plans. And so I ended up writing him a poem and doing a bit of art, and that was one way you can give back. And once again, if you have any questions about the show or the crazy way, the unusual way in which I travel, becoming less and less unusual, I would say it's becoming more and more usual as things like couchsurfing get more popular, and also things like Be Welcome, which is an alternative to couchsurfing. I can put all of this information in the show notes as well. But if you have any questions, please leave a comment on Spotify. I love getting comments on Spotify. And yeah, thanks for listening. This is still very much a labor of love. I don't really make any money on this show, except for the bits that for people who support the show on Patreon. That really helps. It helps me continue this work, and also helps me continue the work with the tropical sci-fi that I'm working on. I will have some updates about that in the coming months. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, always happy to hear comments, or you can shoot me an email, or you can find me on all the places. My username on all the places is Hello Crusoe, HELLOCRUSOE. It's also my Patreon, patreon.com/Hello Crusoe. You can support, you can cancel even after 1 month. You can just try all the stuff out. Listen to all the audiobooks for 1 month. It's much cheaper than getting them on Audible. And then you end up getting it's like 25 hours of content for $5. So that's something you can play with too. The link for that will be in the show notes, of course. And yeah, thanks for listening. And I'm looking forward to talking about Germany soon. And then Turkey, which is Istanbul is an amazing experience. I have some great stories from Istanbul. I've actually, one of the funniest stories I have for this entire podcast is in that chapter of the story. I'm looking forward to Istanbul, but we gotta go in order. We gotta go chronologically. Otherwise, I'm really gonna lose it. So I'll hear from you, or you'll hear from me, or we'll hear from each other, or something will happen soon. Mahalo nui loa, terima kasih, and that's Indonesian. And thank you. Those are all ways to say thank you. Yeah, merci.